الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله ووفى من أبوي mfere o de kan mo ko ya prowi no mu ase de wonde ne ede no na na ade wonde de nyina mu ko ede no na be si hala se mu mi na ede ho mu mi na tu muslimat sele ko wonde ni pa no na de na masalati kawai.
Good rise, all. That's how we'll start it this dawning. I trust you all rested well, traveled well, and have returned back to your space well. And by your space, I mean your temple. By your temple, I mean your place of learning. And by your place of learning, I mean your body. All right? So, here we are again with another from the shrine, but maybe we'll call this one from the temple, huh? All right? You know, there's something that exists within the community of those who, you know, purport Ifa. You know, and I've found a commonality, whether it be on the continent or whether it be in the wilds of North America, that there's sometimes a neglect of the full component of self, you know, in terms of bringing self to the mat, as we call it. And sometimes we put a lot of focus on our spirit, you know, and listening to the spirit and trying to connect to the spirit and doing different rituals that would enhance and proliferate the presence of the spirit in our lives. But then we miss, you know, we miss the inclusion of the mind. You know, not realizing that most things come in threes of great power in this realm, because this is the place of three. That was a sacred number that was given to us from the very beginning. That's why most of the time when you're doing spiritual work, you're doing things, you're giving in threes, you're chanting in threes, third planet from the sun. You know, there's a triplicity of Rumila, Batala, Oduduwa, you know, so forth and so on. So three is a very sacred number. And even within ourselves, as we form our own ciphers, you know, comprising of 120 degrees of spirit, 120 degrees of mental, and 120 degrees of physical. I find that a lot of times the mental and the physical are left out of the equation, and people imagine that all of the work and delving into only the spiritual will create some form of great alchemy that can negate the other parts, the other components of what comprises them. And I have to tell you, it doesn't work that way. You know, you have to deal with the full cipher in order to take advantage of the power of that sacred three. Okay? So just like, you know, when you want to heal and develop your mental, you're going to deal with psychology, or you're going to deal with psychiatry even, maybe to determine what medicine can also enhance the mental. The same thing with the physical. You know, you're going to deal with a physician in order to enhance and to, you know, bring the best out of your physical. And you're going to deal with a spiritualist to bring the best out of your spirit, right? So each one has to be served. Each one has to be attended to. I'm going to give you an example. I've been in ritual all night, right? Haven't gotten a dot of rest since you saw me yesterday, and I spoke to you yesterday, you know, about wisdom in the messenger, right? Wide awake. I'm good. Why am I good? Because I attend to my physical, right? And I'm still sharp mentally because I tend to my mental, right? So sometimes I get asked questions like about is smoking okay? And what I mean smoking, I mean in terms of imbibing with cannabis, where you're not drinking it or eating it, but you're smoking it. I get asked those questions, and you know, I rarely get asked questions about food, you know, other than should I eat meat or not eat meat, you know. But aside from that, when your habits, when your activities and practices become a hindrance to your spiritual work, then now you have an issue. So, you know, depending on what you are doing in this work, or you're called to do in this work, you have to develop a regimen that supports your actual work and supports your lifestyle. So it's a symbiotic relationship, right? It's a symbiotic relationships between the three spheres that create your cipher. So your spiritual work should and has to support your mental well-being and your physical well-being. Your physical well-being should not get in the way of your spiritual work, or your physical well-being should not get in the way, should not get in the way of, the way you spiritize. Your physical well-being should not get in the way of how you think, you know, and whether it be your outlook on life, or whether it just be how you're dissecting and analyzing situations in your life, you know. And of course your mentality, well, your mind is the gateway to everything. If your mind isn't right, then none of this stuff is there. If your mind isn't right, you don't even hear what I'm saying right now. Right? So the mind is the gateway that opens up to all of these different things that we're speaking about. So you have to nurture your entire cipher, right? And your entire cipher being, you know, again, the mental, the physical, or like we say, mind, body, spirit, right? We could just put it that way. Mind, body, spirit, knowledge, wisdom, understanding. Each one correlates, you know, to the other, right? Man, woman, child. Man, woman, child, mind, body, spirit, knowledge, wisdom, understanding. They're all the same thing. I could show you I could create a chart of you, like, you know, to show you the correlations, but I think you can make them yourself if you think about all the things that I've taught over time. So what I'm saying in that instance, you know, is that you have to deal with your full cipher. You know, where I always talk about bringing your full self to the party, or you think about our new spiritual training, where I always say that phase one is ministry to self, right? And, phase 2 hasn't been released as of yet. It's out. It's done. It just has to be published. All the lessons are there, all the quizzes are there and everything. And I decided I'm going to drop it because it's been years now. And the only reason I didn't release it is because I saw that people were not getting through phase 1. They were having so much struggle with phase 1 that I said, dealing with self and the ministry to self was really just hanging people up. But, everything begins with knowledge of self. I might have said that over the sound of the taxi, which I didn't mean to. But everything begins with knowledge of self, and if you can't get through that part, nothing else is going to make sense to you. And I know that's the part that people want to skip over the most, learning about themselves, learning who they are, dealing with who they are, because it's usually not as exotic as learning about all the other invisible and philosophical things flying around in the ethers or flying around in the air. But understand that everything that you're studying, Orisha, so forth and so on, everything exists on the planet. Now it may exist within different dimensions, but everything that you're going to contact and connect with is on this planet, whether it be this mental planet, the physical planet, or the spiritual planet. Because the same way that you have a triplicity of components, so does everything else. Have that same, because 3 is the magic number, right? So, I just want to put that out there as a thought, again, for you to think about today. Is there anything in your physical that gets in the way of your spiritual? Is there anything in your mental that gets in the way of your physical? Are you nurturing everything at the same time, or did you think that once you came into this new spiritual understanding that you wouldn't have to do anything else after that? Because the spirit was going to carry you through, kind of like, as long as I pray over it, I can eat anything I want as long as I pray over it, so, like I said, I see that, I've been seeing that as a phenomenon all over, whether it be the diaspora or whether it be back home, having to have conversations with people about what they eat and, how they're thinking and how that affects what they're doing. Because just like I have that same phenomenon people always ask in the States, man, how do you stay up all the time? I never see you sleep. My students always say, especially those who have done retreats with me, they notice during the retreats, usually the retreats are 2 to 3 days, that I don't sleep. So that's always been a question. How has he been up for 3 days now? And we haven't seen him eat anything once. Well, that's one of the ways that I was able to stay up for 3 days. I didn't eat. So all my energy, goes to the work, But when you have that force moving through you and you're really functioning as an energetic vessel of force, don't worry, I'll get into that later. It's not you holding your body up. It's not you sustaining yourself. It's the actual force that's keeping you, sustained. It's the actual, as we call it, the Rama, that's keeping you up and keeping you alert and keeping you awake and alive and keeping you in the flow of all things. All right, so, you got to nurture the whole child. That's all I'm saying. Be tender with yourselves, man. And sometimes we're just a bit too abusive, especially once, like I said, we come into a certain spiritual understanding and we just feel like, I don't have to do this now, I don't have to do that. I don't have to, especially if your spiritual understanding has any notions of any type of after paradise. We start to ignore the body and we don't understand that, we carved and shaped the body very deliberately for the work that it is that we needed to do. And sometimes we ignore the damage sometimes that's also hurled upon our body because we forget that our first damage is our first sign of our first genius. Like I always tell you, I tell students, so I guess I can tell the public, when they always ask me about, I don't know my gifts, and you talk about gifts, but I don't have any gifts. I don't know what I do. And I always say, you always receive your first attack where your gifts are. Always receive your first attacks where your gifts are. Always remember that, right? So I'll give you an example using myself, and some of you may have the same example. I'll wait till the car goes by. I was born with a strep throat, right? So, no big deal. Born with a strep throat, right? But here's the thing. As many of you know, a lot of the work that I do revolves around speaking. Everybody's coming out now. Now everybody's waking up to the day. Let this car go by. Actually, that was a cho-cho. But like I was saying, is that a lot of what I do revolves around speaking. So where the gift was where my very first attack was. You see? And some of you, like I said, some of you may have a similar story. You may have a similar kind of thing. You may have been born with a certain thing or whatever. Or you may have been wounded at birth. You may have been scarred at birth. Your scar is where your genius is. Your scar is where your gift is. I'm telling you. And you can talk to a lot of people who are scarred in some shape, form, or fashion, whether it be through militarism, whether it be through war, or whether it be through, just something emotional or mental or traumatic that happened to them. And you speak to them about how they kind of resolve it and how they kind of get through it, not over it. Getting over something is nothing, but how they get through it. And you're going to find that the way that they've resolved to get through it shows a level of genius on their part. Because where your scar is where your genius is. Where your scar is where your gift is. Where your first attack is where your first signs of your genius and your gifts are. All right? So, you want to pay attention to those things. And sometimes those scars are physical. So then try to interpret, what that may mean from the physical, right? So me being born with a strep throat, okay, there's some throat chakra there, stuff there that I'm going to be able to use later on in life. And throat chakra is not just speaking, but it's also how you interpret and extrapolate abstracting ideas and complex ideas and then represent them. All right? So that's what I wanted to share today with you all. And I trust that you will all travel safe. You will all travel well, and just give some thought to that on this day, on your journey through becoming more proficient Aborisha. Give some thought to essentially, am I really dealing with my full cipher of myself and nurturing the full cipher and paying attention to all the signs and wonders that are associated with the full cipher of what I am and who I am? Or am I just focused on, I want to be this great this? And I want to tell you, one of the things that also kind of propelled this thought in this segment was that I always look at the stats on videos and podcasts and stuff. I find it very interesting. And of course, since I've been doing these daily segments, I noticed that the views are higher on, like, for instance, how the easy way to give offerings, which was the first segment we did. Those views are much higher than, let's say, like the segment I did on bata drums, right? Now, of course, everyone's not a drummer, but the show wasn't about being a drummer. It was about the theory and the concept and the culture. See, that's the wisdom. Wisdom is really your ability to give culture, your ability to share culture. That's why the woman is the sustainer of culture, because she's the wisdom. It's a whole lot to that. Maybe one day that's for students. That's for our new people. But anyway, so yeah, people want the how-tos, right? How do I do this? How do I do that? How do I do that? But they don't want the wisdom and the understanding that comes behind it. And I see that in the stats. And it's not a complaint or anything like that. But I just, it's just good to know who you're talking to when you're talking, All right. So that has been our segment. And I got to get moving on some things. I'm not done all-night rituals, but the work continues, And soon the heat of the sun will be out too. So I'll have to shift what I'm doing. Until such time, move safe, move well, Odabo.